welcome to the Dynasty Diehards late night. Something we've never done before, but we're going to have fun with it. And I know you know me, Nate Polvogt, the general host of the Dynasty Diehards. However, tonight we're going to do something different. I'm handing it off to my dude here, Dynasty Coach John Arrington from DLF, and he is going to take over. John, what do you want to talk about tonight, man?
First of all, I just want to apologize to everyone. No. All right, so earlier tonight, we were on the Razzball channel, and we talked about a little bit of everything, but we really focused on the skill positions. We focused on the wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and we're still going to talk about that in the late night thing. But we have Barnabas Lee with us tonight. We have Mike Valerie with us tonight, and I will say, I was watching them. They were interviewing all of the big boys this week.
Well,
so before we get the big cakes, that's right. Yeah, before we get into all the good stuff, who stood out? Because I mean that's going to matter because you're going to see an offensive lineman go to a team, and it might not matter necessarily for fantasy purposes until it actually matters because all of a sudden that quarterback's better, that running back's better, that kind of thing. So
we're talking about opening up new holes, guys. It's something that's not talked about enough in fantasy football, and it's something I did last season for Fantasy Pros. Offensive line, defense, these things matter for fantasy. And it doesn't matter if you play in IDP leagues. The ramifications of what these full units can do on a play-to-play basis matter all the way across the board. So it's really important that we really dig into this stuff, right?
We don't have to care. We don't have to stat them out. We don't have to do all that. All we have to do is listen to the smart guys that do. Right. So why don't we bring in Barnabas and Mike? And who stood out to you? We're going to start with Barnabas just because he's a little bit smarter. But
So at the Senior Bowl, the interesting thing, right, was that they stacked all the offensive linemen on the national team.
Sure.
And all the good defensive linemen that we wanted to see were on the American team.
It was a little weird.
Yeah. So we are not going to see these guys go up against each other until Saturday. Yep. And so we haven't seen these guys necessarily with their ideal matchups, but the one defender that was on the national team is Leada Latu, who's probably a first-round lock at this point, a complete technician from the edge position. A lot of people have a little problem with his upright stance, but his game isn't predicated upon like explosion or speed or bender on the edge, and so attacking that outside shoulder of the tackle isn't a priority. Therefore, the advantages of getting in a lower stance to attack that shoulder isn't as necessary for him. Two tackles that stood out to me are actually Pac-12 guys. Technically, we talk about Pac-12 being a weaker defenses, so we give them less credit, sure. But my two tackles that I was really impressed with, and I was really excited to see coming into the week was Talise Fuaga, the right tackle out of Oregon State. He is a right tackle only. And then Jordan Morgan, who's a tackle from Arizona. He's had a little bit of injuries. He's never played a full season in college. But that being said, in terms of stuff you see on tape and the tangible tools you see even this week, he's one of the best out there. And it just takes one team to believe in his ability to stay healthy to take a chance on him. Fuaga, on the other chance, is just a gargantuan human being. And I always compare him to a club bouncer. He's going to throw you at the club if you misbehave. And he'll jump on top of you after he does that as well. And so it was really interesting to see those guys. And I hope they got a lot of NFL traction this week.
We actually had our bouncer at Beats this weekend actually gave us, recommendations for soul food and everything else. Like we actually got we got in good with the bouncers. We're not getting kicked out.
So we love the bouncers. So when we're talking about bouncers, let's talk about some edge rushers, guys. Who stood out to you from the edge rushing standpoint in this class, in this group today, this week, that you think has made an impact at the NFL level? Guys who are going to be in IDP leagues, all right? Because we all have some level of IDP love, right? Guys that you think are worthwhile looking at in IDP leagues.
So you're going to talk about UCLA Edge. The only other one to really talk about, I don't think it was a strong edge class this week, was Austin Booker, from Kansas. Yeah. As far as technique goes, I usually say that for Barnabas. I try to stay in my lane here, but I do recognize, and I think it's understated, how the trench dictates the game flow. If your quarterback has enough time to throw, he can just sit in the pocket all day, which gives even like your receivers that aren't good at routing, like a like a Johnny Wilson, just not that much of a fluid mover.
Sure.
As
we have discussed.
Yes, it gives those
Yes.
players enough time to
Yes.
get open. So if you have a nice trench, even with like guys that are improvising skill sets, if you can have the front line hold long enough, and then you got your Caleb Williams who can like improvise and even extend the play even longer to help those players get out of there. So
Sure.
it's just, I think the game lives and dies by the trench. But I can't answer that question accurately. Barnabas is the one that has the technical ability to.
There's a
really
reason
analyze
why we
that
started
stuff.
with Barnabas.
It is.
Yeah. But I do like watching the trench. I recognize too, like Michigan is a 2-time Joe Moore winning line in like the last 3 years. And you watch like Blake Column-Tape, for example, or even Dom Evers, you can see those guys like they get to the second level. They're constantly on the linebacker. Linebackers are not penetrating in. They are getting linebackers first. And even sometimes like box safeties trying to sneak in, they get those guys early too. Like it's almost uncontested, and all those running backs got to do is just read the helmets. It makes their jobs so much easier. And then people are like, oh, wow, this guy's got great vision. It's like, he's just reading the helmets, and that's a prerequisite of the NFL. That's
Sure,
not like a top trait. But Barnabas is the guy that has like the technical like analysis of like the hand motions and like the stances. I'm not there yet.
Okay, so Barnabas, do you have that with the DNs, the defensive linemen? Like, is somebody standing out in the Senior Bowl for you?
Yeah, I mean, the person that obviously got the most traction this week was Darius Robinson. Jim Nagy was pushing him. Dave Brugler from The Athletic was pushing him.
Yep.
And so I think he really shot his stock up, if nothing else, just getting in front of scouts with against other teams. As for the edges, we don't really have that many sack specialists at the Senior Bowl.
And they're not allowed to hit the QB.
They're not allowed to.
So, like, you can't do anything to, like, truly prove your merit.
Well, I mean, the tackle one-on-ones really do show that merit. And we saw that none of them were particularly bendy or weren't necessarily, I like that Latu attacks the outside shoulder. His best move is when he attacks the outside shoulder and then comes back in the inside. And the coaches were really working on that with the edges this week. I think they're really good run defenders though. So IDP, you want sacks. Those are probably higher value. But, there are guys that'll rack up some tackles throughout the year. Austin Booker mentioned. He's really like a strong guy, and the coaches really were coaching him up a fairly amount, and he was kind of leading that national team, I think. Someone like Javon Solomon from Troy or Brennan Jackson from Washington State, both guys that are just good run defenders. I think Brennan Jackson has a very unique athleticism. It's kind of something we don't see anymore, and it doesn't help that he wears the number 80 out there, and so you kind of assume he's a tight end, but he's actually a defensive end that plays a little bit inside, like almost a 5-tech at times as well. And so he's someone that has a little bit of versatility, can kind of be like an inside guy on pass rushing downs, maybe get some inside pressure, but he's more of a stronger guy. Same thing with Solomon. He's not an edge guy, but he does a really good job setting the edge. And that Troy defense obviously was so good for so long. On the interior, another edge that I want to talk about is Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who is the Notre Dame edge. He was a backfill.
Yes,
so
he looked really good this weekend.
He looked okay, but
no, all right.
Hey, you're gonna find out that we don't know this part of the game, and they do. We focus on the fantasy stuff. This is why we ask the questions and they answer it. And yet, here we are.
He didn't look bad by any means, but he looked okay. Notably, he was the backfill for guys who dropped out, so he was actually on the American team, even though the rest of the Notre Dame guys were on the national team.
That's a rarity, right? I mean, generally speaking, you see the same players on the same.
Absolutely. Michael Wiley was another case of that this year, though. But yeah, Javonte Jean-Baptiste notably was the missing 11th player on that last final play against Ohio State. If you all remember, that was like the last second touchdown. They had only 10 on the field, and I believe Javonte Jean-Baptiste was the one that was missing on that play.
Oh wow!
And so there's that, but he's more of a run stopper as well, and we expected a little bit more out of him maybe this year. And so it was good to see that at least technically he's still sound, and we have that Notre Dame training. They obviously have great coaching staff there, and so. Good stuff. And then I did want to mention on the interior, Dwayne Carter was causing havoc everywhere. So that's someone you might see some interior sacks from, and definitely some run defense from. And yeah, go ahead.
On the negative side, Adisa Isaac was a guy I watched pretty coming in here, the Penn State edge. Chop Robinson is also coming out as a very highly touted edge rusher himself. You think it's a first rounder, Chop Robinson?
Chop Robinson first round.
Yeah. Okay. So. But Adisa Isaac also, if you're just looking at box scores, he has a really good stat record too. You're looking at him and you're like, this guy's probably pretty good too. But watching the film, I was like, I think the quarterback's just scared of chop and moving into like use those lane a lot, and that was kind of a lot of the case. I do personally feel like he got a little bit exposed to making that true this week, maybe a little bit less effective of a player. Again, so has the tools, and Penn State has, I think, one of the best like strength conditioning programs in the nation. So like, I'm sure like come combine, like he's gonna blow out the combine, and he's gonna label himself as a product, and worthwhile product. But
yeah, in terms of athletic testing for sure. But
yeah,
I think the big problem was that we saw he was very stiff in the hips, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when he's trying to turn the corner, he can't pull his hip through as fast, and so tackles just are cutting that corner out from him. And so his best move is probably the same thing where he tries to cut under, but I don't think he's flexible enough to even push off that outside leg to get back inside as well. I definitely think he was better rushing from the right side than the left side. But,
I agree with that. He's not quite as fluid as Johnny Wilson, but what we see is
Jesus, John.
This
is what I get for letting you host. We're going to talk about Johnny Wilson, but for real, let's talk about quarterbacks. Was there anybody who stood out in coverage this week that was, someone like in IDP leagues where it's like, I have to have this guy as like a first or second round rookie pick in IDP that was just blew your mind?
I just want to say, I don't play a lot of IDP, but I do know that you don't want corners in IDP leagues because they don't get the ball thrown to them.
Fair point.
So they don't get
Good
points, which I do think
Fair
is
point.
like the main flaw of the system.
I've only been in one IDP league, and you actually want the worst corners because they do get the ball thrown them, and then they tackle the player.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're the worst corners here. You absolutely must draft.
Right.
The Georgia corner, but no.
There we go.
But as far as like I see overall though, like this was a really strong corner class that was here. Keon Mitchell was a phenomenal corner from Toledo. He had like 4 picks in one game last year, which I think he had a total of 5 picks on the year, which is still a high number. But when you look at when you look at it, you're like, well, was it just a one really good game?
Right.
So I thought it was really nice seeing him play against NFL level wide receivers. There are varying levels, but like he was looking bored out there.
Sure.
He was the lockdown corner this week, and maybe probably did actually play himself in the first round draft capital. And I don't need to play like today. I just think he wants to come field. Like he loves ball. Even though he was bored out there, I think he would have hated not being out there and being competitive.
Sure.
Absolutely.
he was someone that had first round buzz coming in, and then he probably raised that stock even more. Like he could be, in the middle of the round even at this point. So really excited to see him.
Yeah.
But I was impressed with some of these SEC and ACC. Well, Jarvis Brownlee I'll mention first.
Yeah, and we talked about him this week.
Yeah, Louisville corner just absolutely dominated yesterday. And we had an interesting conversation with him as well. Just kind of like a humble guy. We were like, were you like jawing with the receivers and we were dominating them? He's like, no, I'm not really a talker. I just kind of let my play do the talking. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. Some other guys, some of the safeties really stood out as well. I'm sorry, I guess it's a subject change, but
secondary.
Andrew Phillips too, cornerback from Kentucky. Really high at day one, really unimpressed. Day two though, he's like the first guy that shut down Ladd. Like a lot of people were getting him pushing, and then day two they're like, let's not give him any space. And once they got into his frame, like Ladd just couldn't get free. So Andrew Phillips like shut down Ladd initially. He had another good rep against, I can't remember on the sidelines, but it was a really good day for him, a pick as well. I didn't see him day 3. So I'm wondering if that was another one of the guys for like a day who said you did enough, let's get out of here.
Yeah,
Like that's always a good sign. So on Andrew Phillips was a good, I'm not saying like top 3, but Max Melton, I'll talk about Max Melton.
Sure, Max Melton is Packers rookie Bo Melton's younger brother.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is he a rookie? Wasn't Bo Melton
second year player?
Second
Yeah.
Okay.
Melton's in his 30s.
Bo Melton liked my tweet.
Bo Melton's like 28, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's like 28. Didn't he play with the USFL or whatever?
No. You're thinking about.
Am I thinking somebody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're thinking somebody else. He came straight out of Rutgers.
Probably.
Yeah, the
I promise you.
brothers played
I
together.
wrote a bunch of rookies.
Okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. I was thinking
Max
somebody else.
Melton is also, so Jarvis Brown is a slot only. Max Melton from Rutgers is also a slot only guy.
Okay.
Quick feet. He's a little bit rail thin, but that's okay. He's one of the fastest guys on the field at any given point.
The slot only guys are becoming more prevalent or like more necessary at this point, right? Like,
And to your point, Max Melton was the fastest player at the Senior Bowl practice today.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
So-
he was. Yeah, he was. Blew it up.
Was it 21 miles an hour?
It's like right at like 21.8. I think it's right around like 28.5.
Okay,
So yeah, he smoked everybody today.
Absolutely.
Back to Max Melton.
Yeah, I mean, slot corner, he's not, I wish he would stay in a pedal slightly longer, but that's really just nitpicking at that point. He's just a gnat in someone's ear, just like constantly buzzing around. And I saw wide receivers visibly get frustrated when he was coming.
Sure.
So, I think he had a good week overall as well. And I think the Auburn guys also had a pretty good day. Auburn sent 3 defensive backs to the Senior Bowl this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, who I think had a quiet but like successfully quiet week where you didn't really notice him. He wasn't because all the quarterbacks were avoiding him. Even Spencer Rattler, who's over analyzing the play, avoided Nehemiah Pritchett.
That's the problem about corners, especially like something like this. It's like you're being avoided, and yet that's a good thing. You know, so like no one's like, oh my god, they just made an amazing play. It's because they didn't get thrown to, or thrown at,
Right.
or that kind of thing.
Right.
I think that unfortunately, this is not our wheelhouse, but you guys did a great job of explaining it. But one thing I want to focus on is Mike has really focused on the past couple of years, the whole Senior Bowl bump and that kind of thing. Like he's really focused on the Senior Bowl, and so not necessarily a defensive thing or an offensive thing, but I mean, if you feel like there's one player in particular, you can obviously say them. But do you think that there is going to be a bump from the Senior Bowl for a specific group or for a specific player or anything like that? Because generally speaking, we do see at least a couple of players that get that bump, and all of a sudden they're in the second round, they're in the first round possibly, like Cooper Kupp, somebody like that, whatever. Like all of a sudden you're just like skyrocketing up because you're there.
Well, the whole thing about Super Bowl is to answer questions about mystery. So like we just mentioned Keon Mitchell, right? Only played against like SCS. He was a part of the MAC. Like it's not like MAC receivers or like SCS covered. So it's like that. So as far as like the bump goes, I think it just helps because these NFL executives get like actual tape and get hands-on experience with guys early to see like just get to know them a little bit better. So it's kind of like a pre-draft process that's like a little bit unfair because guys go to the Shrine Bowl is definitely an increasing organization, but outside of that, like everyone else doesn't get this early look. They get like the combine and like the combine interviews. Otherwise, like their game plans with the guys.
Yeah.
So that's the bump. It's the extra exposure.
Yeah. Extra exposure. All right. So like I said, we're not the defensive guys.
We're not.
But we have not been talking a lot. So now I want to talk more because I'm generally like.
Well, you want to talk about John
something to that effect. I really don't, but I love it. I love this movie. So, yeah, big guy. But all right, so now we're gonna transition over to the offensive players, and we're gonna go ahead and talk for a little bit. All right, so Nate, my friend, who stood out to you? We talked about this on the earlier pod, but not everyone watched that, so we're starting over here.
Okay,
who stood out to you?
I was hosting last time, so I didn't get to talk a whole lot.
You should say Sione Baki.
I barely talked in the last one too. Like no one.
No, you were only like 60%.
Yeah. No one got to
nearly enough for you, right?
Of course.
So this has been an interesting first Senior Bowl for me, and I think the players who stood out to me, some of you talk about Kamani Vidal. I thought he did a lot to increase his draft stock. We saw a lot of things out of a small school guy against some big school guys, where he showed he can compete at this level. So I mean, when we're talking about raising draft stock, we're talking he's now a 5th round running back, right?
Sure.
Which is great.
Which is almost like really good draft capital.
That's almost Tyjae Spears' draft
right.
capital, and we know what Tyjae
in
Spears
the new,
is.
Tyjae was a 3rd.
Well, no, but it's almost
third. He was 3rd. I can see Kamani getting into the 3rd.
No, get out of here.
No, don't get out of here.
Nah.
There's a lot of time to go.
Well,
love what I saw from
the point of the story is that we see
Lad McConkey.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Lad McConkey, I liked what I saw of him, though when he was facing press coverage, that was concerning.
Yeah,
it was.
I wanted to see more Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah,
Pearsall. He wasn't around today. That was kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
I thought that
it's usually a good sign, though.
Right.
Yeah, usually when they go
wrong,
like Johnny Wilson, like today.
I don't think there were really that many questions with Ricky, right? Like he's a solid route runner. He works well in the slot. What more do you want to see?
Well, he just wasn't like winning, and that was like the whole like wasn't the buzz, but it was also like a lot of fouls being drawn on him. It was pretty obvious.
Right.
Now,
Well,
day one, he fell on the ground twice. I don't know what that was about. It wasn't good. But outside of that, though, he was drawing a lot of fouls for being successful.
I don't know that he actually like raised his draft capital, but I don't think he lost anything in the grand scheme of things.
Sure.
Like, so I would say, like, I mean, I've always
Not a
kind of,
loser, the hard call winner.
I've always kind of felt
Sure.
like Pearsall was like a 5th round pick. Is that fair? You like hyper focus on stuff. No?
Third.
What do you think?
Oh, I think the third.
Second.
Third?
I think
Second.
Wow, that's high. I would not have guessed. And I always consider myself a Pearsall fan. I would not have guessed 3rd
I
round pick.
clumped him to Percy Harvin, which is kind of late.
Although, to be
I
fair-
don't know about that.
But like,
Well, no,
from
he's
a
not.
size
He's not a
perspective,
player.
they're not the same. From a tools perspective, they feel the same.
I mean,
But
Percy- Percy's a
we're gonna move
fan.
on from Ricky Purcell.
Okay.
Okay. I want to talk about Tez Walker.
Yeah, that was.
Ups and downs.
It was a really up and down thing with Tez Walker, and I want to talk about it because we all talked about this constantly over the last 3 days.
Yeah.
Is he good? Because he showed it in routes. Like, he can run the routes, he can get open, but his hands are a question. And a debate as old as time. Do we care about drops? Because we stopped caring about it with Deontay Johnson because there's so much talent there that it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, 5 drops, but 90 catches on it, and no touchdowns.
There.
Right.
It's a bun. Yeah.
Tez Walker,
Yeah.
do you see him walking into a situation where there's enough volume for the drops and the hand issues not to matter in the NFL? Is there a team that will love him enough where he's fantasy relevant despite the hand issues?
I don't want Mike to be at like 65% on the spot, so I'm going to ask Barnabas, like, you know, what are you looking at when you're thinking of, you know, of that player?
They're plotting against
They're plotting against us. Yeah.
You know, another player in past Senior Bowls that we've noticed have major drop issues is someone we've seen those drop issues continue to happen in the NFL. And that's Kadarius Toney, right?
Right.
He was someone that was wide open every single one.
I love this. I love this.
Now, to be fair, Kadarius Toney did not have the college production or really anything compared to Tez Walker.
Like 900 receiving yards.
But the
In
talent
like
level,
in a
I
4,000
like
yard
this comparison
offense.
because I feel like the talent level's
I
similar.
don't know, Tim Tebow.
I feel like Tez Walker and Kadarius Toney, like I feel like they're comps, comparable.
Well,
John-
one of them is actually
Yeah,
like
yeah.
good at football, and one of them isn't. But yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
Kadarius
Bob.
Toney's terrible.
So we know that we've seen in the past that like drops in the Senior Bowl are pretty indicative of
Okay.
possible issues at the next level. You know, selfishly, I think dropping his stock is a little bit good as a Cowboys fan because maybe we can finally get Michael Gallup's replacement. But you know, the thing is this, right? He has very little separation ability, horizontal and vertical. Even you know, he's not fast by any means, and he showed up looking pretty skinny. I think most of us, when we first walked in on practice on Tuesday, we said, "Oh, he's a lot skinnier than I thought he looked."
100%.
So those are negatives. Positive from Tez is that, you know, he's one of the fastest accelerators in the class, right? 3 steps and he's at his top speed. Not that top speed is necessarily elite, but he's at his top speed in 3 steps. And, you know, I think many people have noted that. So the question is, okay, how do you use that acceleration to emphasize his skill set, which is as a deep threat? Because I think he has decent aerials, despite the fact that his hands may not be able to finish the play.
Yep.
And so one thing is that a lot of what they were doing today were quicker routes. And so if you have an offense that has an offensive line that can develop those deeper routes, but 2, has an offensive system that emphasizes attacking a deep third against, you know, cover 2 doesn't really exist in the NFL anymore, right? And so you need some other concept that's holding the other safeties in the middle so that you can create that outside leverage on the outside. And so I think it has more to do with system than it does to do with Tez as a player necessarily. I think it was a really bad showing for him, to be honest, because I think we were counting on Wednesday. I think he was up to like 6 drops by like the 3/4 mark of practice, and it was not really acceptable by any means. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, the athletic talent is there, and it really is going to depend, you know, as a poor a metric as it is, it's going to depend on his 40 time. And so, you know, I'm interested to see what that time is because At 6 foot, what did he come in at? A little over 6'1"?
6'1.5".
6'1.5", which is much lower than he was listed at college. Now the expectation for his 40 time goes up because the shorter you are, the easier it is to accelerate out of it.
But he was also listed as one of the fastest, if not the fastest wide receiver.
No, I actually do think, although it's screening Barnes, I think he has that top end NFL speed. Like,
Sure.
In terms of 3 steps, like, I think that's what he does. But like, I also feel like he's not manipulated. Man coverage is not his thing. He will lose.
Okay.
I don't think you need to be like a savant to be useful in the NFL. It's mostly zone coverage nowadays. So
Sure.
not being able to win against man is okay. I guess that limits, like, I can't see you being a top tier guy, but it's not the end of everything. You know, he still has that trait, that tool for him.
Yep.
The hands weren't much of an issue at UNC. It definitely has been this week, which is a massive red flag.
Absolutely.
But
it has been a problem.
Yeah,
100%.
It's a tool, but I think like for an NFL team, like it's no longer like he's a first round talent or he's a wide receiver too. I think it's more like a rotational piece with a specific skill set.
Sure.
But if he has space to operate, like he's lethal. And like those type of players only need one play to break the game. So
Sure.
yeah, that's it.
To be fair, I never actually saw him as a first round talent, but people were pushing him up to that, and I was like, well, if he's gonna be a first round talent, then okay, like that's pretty cool because he is talented.
Yeah.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with him being a first round talent, but I like the player. I do kind of disagree with Barnabas. Like you were saying, he doesn't necessarily separate. I feel like he's separated better than just about anyone else. And I'm not a film grinder, so like Mike's gonna hate this, but like I feel like he's separated better than most wide receivers this week. But he had the drop issues. Like there's no doubt about it. Like he had issues. He was not a perfect prospect today or this week or anything like that. But I mean, he clearly separated in practice. So maybe he had some issues in college or whatever it may be. But he seemed to do it this week. I mean, do you disagree with the past 3 days? Not necessarily the career.
When given space.
I think we have different definitions of separation.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, that's good.
In today's NFL, schemes are either predicated on, I'm a Cowboys fan, so I'll say, like the Cowboys system where we're just gonna line up and whoever beats their man is gonna get the ball, and that's why CD Lamb gets the ball 15 times.
Yeah.
Sure.
However, the Shanahan tree, the Mike McDaniel offensive systems and such are predicated on creating separation at breaks, right? So it's either going into the break or coming out of acceleration out of the break.
Yes.
That's going to create that separation.
Sure.
Devontae Walker doesn't create that horizontal separation. So I think what you're seeing is a vertical separation in that he does get up a little bit better than some of these shorter.
Well, you
corners.
mentioned the 3-step.
Yes.
Like he has that speed. He has that burst.
But
So
it's not
very
getting there
easy.
at the breaks because any corner can catch up with it. Like
Okay.
if you give me Max Melton, I think he can cover Devontae Walker just fine
Okay.
horizontally, right? But the fact is Devontae Walker like gets up there a little bit. And so if you throw it up to him with a quarterback that's accurate enough to adjust that pathing where it's a higher in point to the catch point, then you can avoid smaller corners even if they're fast enough to keep up with it.
Sure.
And so, like, I think that acceleration, I wouldn't call it elite speed. I call it, I'm expecting like a high 4.4 speed is probably where I'd be like, okay, that's good speed.
Very good. Very good speed.
That's a good speed. I mean, we have become spoiled with how fast athletes have gotten in recent years. But high 4.4s, I'm taking that. Even
Definitely.
up to 4.55, I'm probably like saying, okay, that's good enough.
Sure.
Let's run. But he doesn't have the break ability and he doesn't have the acceleration out of that break even on a horizontal plane to create that space for quarterbacks to go. And that's okay for a guy that plays bigger than his official listed weight.
Sure.
Like, obviously, he was listed at 6'2" at Kent State and 6'3" at UNC for a reason, in that they expected him to be a bigger receiver. And other issues aside with eligibility, etc. Like, he does play bigger than his listed weight, a height of a little over 6'1". So I'll say this, right? We all saw an up and down week from Tez Walker this week.
Sure.
Absolutely.
But
no
the fact
question that.
But the fact of the matter, and some receivers, boosted their stock, some saw their stock maybe fall a little bit. Tez Walker is still probably the first wide receiver off the board in the draft, come draft time, of this group.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and
Sure,
so,
that makes sense.
yeah, And
I don't know if that
so,
makes
so we're nitpicking here because we're expecting elite production.
Sure.
And elite traits.
I did expect
Yeah.
better from Tez, and it didn't happen.
Well, we
I
all
just saw-
expect better.
I
Yeah,
saw-
for sure.
I saw more separation than you're talking about, but you're also talking about, you're mixing in with different corners and different everything. So like, just because separation doesn't necessarily mean it's good separation.
Yeah.
So maybe you're seeing something different, and that's fine. I'm not a film grinder. That's not my thing. That's
Sure.
not my jam.
Yeah.
But I did see a lot of separation from him. I also saw a lot of drops. It was kind of like a mad week for Tez. I wish that he had done better. I still like the player, and I agree with you. Like I feel like he's still going to be the first or second player up the board when it's all said and done.
The other plus with his speed too is that like that's a big NFL thing too. He can be a field stretcher, which also draws coverage from the safety.
Yes.
Like, you can't let those
100%.
speed guys just run free from you.
Yeah.
So he can draw coverage from other guys too. So it's like a schematic and like a game plan type thing. He still be super influential, just like for fantasy guys like us. Like that's not
Sure.
You're right.
but that's also important. And like there's some really good things in the Senior Bowl this year too. Like there was like Cam Kitchen from Miami. We love Cam. He was the ball hog.
Kitchens looked really good.
Yeah, and even in like 1v1, like against I think lined up against Lad twice, and each time he just gave him 5 yards of cushion and let him do his like he probably said like you can do a little footwork and just be stupid in the 5 yard zone. And like he caught like his 2 shallow passes and immediately locked him up right away.
All right,
Like,
so
he's very smart. So
we got to talk about Lad though. All right. So people lost kind of.
we're talking about safeties now. I thought you kind of
No. We're talking about Lad now. All right. Everyone kind of lost their mind about Lad, on day one.
Yeah.
Like he really did. He did very well in the 1v1 drills, and then he kind of fell off a little bit in the 11-on-11. But like, people didn't really focus on that part. They were more concerned about the 1-on-1, and that's fine. Day 2, we didn't really see the same Lad. You already talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Day 3,
Press coverage. And
Yeah,
actual fighting in the
he's
routes.
losing routes because he can't be physical enough to do it. And obviously, like, that's a slot receiver. Like that's kind of expected.
Really won't be worried about the pro level. They won't be seeing that too much. Like,
Sure.
It's there's a lot of motion in the game now, right? There's a lot of motion in the game. There's ways to have like scheme players to have to avoid press coverage. So I don't think like players beating. I think press used to be such a big deal about like 5 years ago, and I feel like each year we go in more analysis. I think press is becoming less important to beat. I think that can just be helped with offensive scheme.
Sure.
But
That
Lad also had a pretty quiet day 3, did he not? And
I mean, I don't.
It was a
okay,
chill
so-
day. There was no 1v1s. Like
Yeah.
it was a chill day.
well, I'm saying in 11-on-11, like,
Yeah.
he was not targeted very often. Like, there wasn't
He was
too much
running a lot of
going on.
like drag routes and stuff today.
Sure.
I think they were. I feel like they were doing like different stuff with him. Because like, to your point, when we were watching 11-on-11s, I swear the first like 4 routes he ran were drag routes. And
Okay.
then he ran a couple of slants. He ran a couple of curls. It was nothing downfield.
He had a couple catches. I'm not saying he didn't do anything.
Right, but we didn't see the usage we'd seen out of him the first
Right.
2 days through 11-on-11s and 1-on-1 versus 1s. His usage was different today. So we saw him doing different things that maybe we didn't see so much of that maybe, I don't know, an NFL franchise that was at the Senior Bowl.
Sure,
One of the coaches
of course.
like, hey, we want to see Lad do these drag routes. We want to see some more curls. Like,
And we did
look
find
at
out
this
this week
different
that the teams are definitely doing that.
They're
saying,
definitely doing
hey,
that.
we want to see
We
this
saw-
route, and next thing you know,
we saw
that player's
Tomlin-
running that route.
We saw Mike Tomlin take over entire drills this week.
Correct.
He wasn't supposed to be taking over these drills, but he wanted to see certain players doing certain things. So this is how these kinds of events work. So what we were watching today, I
Apparently,
feel
they're
like
trying to find a
now as
good
we're
one.
talking through it, I feel like there's some NFL executives that wanted to see Lad McConkey do some different things
Sure.
that we're not used to seeing him do. That hasn't been asked to do at Georgia, because in the NFL he's going to be asked to do these things.
But he was a superstar on day 1, and then
He
day
was.
2 and day 3, he was a
grinder.
pedestrian.
He was a grinder.
He was a pedestrian.
I'm gonna call him.
I'm scared of that.
But also
Are you
pedestrian.
guys scared of that? Like,
No,
how do you feel
it's
about
not
that?
It's a slot receiver. Let's not.
And that's what we're saying, like,
it's a slot
You
receiver.
got him into the drag routes, the slant routes, the curl routes. They
But
saw what they
I feel
needed
like-
to see from him.
He still had the best footwork. He's still a
If
separator.
you're just focusing on Twitter
He
and
was the
things like that,
best. He was the best route
Sure,
runner
of course.
here.
if you're just focusing on Twitter and stuff like that, you're probably going to see a pretty good bump
Sure.
to Lad McConkey. Do you feel like he deserves like a true bump from what you felt like before the Senior Bowl?
I thought people were already pounding the table for him. I think this is just a little bit more convincing for it. So as far as
Sure.
the bump goes, I probably wasn't like super in. But like, I think he's another third rounder.
Okay, so third round pick, a slot receiver, not somebody that you're talking about as like in fantasy purposes, like a wide receiver one, even like a high end wide receiver two, or anything like that. I just don't want. I don't want our fans or our
Guys,
listeners.
I want to go to the producer real quick. Herbs, Lad McConkey, what do you think?
I think he was good.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Excellent.
Yeah,
All right.
excellent analysis.
Excellent.
I don't want our listeners to just all of a sudden think that
Who's
they
Howard?
probably
He's
heard.
not even your show. He's like our listeners.
Well, I mean,
Me
me and Nate are besties and all. You know,
Yeah, look at us. We're couch
right?
buddies.
Like we're kind of like co-hosting here.
Well,
Like, come on.
I'm gonna move on to another varsity that's not actually getting talked about. At all.
Okay.
Not at all. And that's Sione Baki, who's also plays safety. But we'll get into the wide receiver stuff first. He's a very versatile player. He plays some running backs. He got some reps there, running back. One rep for wide receivers, but wasn't like a great rep. Like it was, his second break was bad, and then he just saw the open space to the right, which you know it's 1v1s. You can do that. You can still the open space to like realize the
Right.
side, the other players. It's so it was a fine route, but like his versatility, I think it's going to be like that's going to be his stock rider. I don't think it's actually an individual one skill set. I think the team's going to be like we can probably pick him, and then like if we have the efficiency in one spot, we can shape him to be
That person.
that person. But another like big name in the safety class is also Keaton Oladipo from Oregon State. And what are we talking about?
Katana Oladapo.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
He said no, bro.
Yeah, Katana Oladapo has always been one of my favorites throughout this process. Man coverage safety, second leading tackler on Oregon State's defense, which was a pretty good defense, all things considered.
Yeah.
6'2", I think he weighed in at like 195, maybe 200 or something.
Right.
Yeah, something like that, which is, you know, good dimensions. Just solidly built dude. And you notice that he was also the one that was representing the defense on 1v1s and practice day one for those push-ups on the line.
Did he catch the long ball in the end zone? That's the real question.
He got some picks. You know,
I wasn't watching interceptions.
Well, there we go.
I was looking for good feet, which he did. You know, he manages cushion really well. For example, in today's end zone, they did a bunch of stuff inside the red zone. Theo Johnson was just running this quick out that didn't even have a cut to it. And Oladapo was just eating that up the entire day.
Yeah.
And so Theo Johnson, I don't think saw a single target during that red zone period. And so
We saw one.
yeah, it was.
Maybe.
But it wasn't a good target.
Yeah. And to be fair, the quarterbacks were struggling, so okay, fine.
Right.
You know, I think Bo Nix, not to switch to quarterbacks, but I think Bo Nix got some bad advice somewhere, where someone told him to calm down his feet, and he had a little bit of case of the Mitch Trubisky happy feet going on. And I think someone told him to calm it down, and that made him afraid to step into throws.
Sure.
And so I think that's why he was short-arming everything this week. But Katana Oladapo, I think, is someone that a team will value. You know, he's a former walk-on that team, and just a solid dude. We had a really good conversation. He was explaining Oregon State's cover four to us, and such. And so I think he's someone that interviewed well, probably behind doors as well. Obviously, we don't have access to that interaction, but I'd imagine he was a good interview. And
he was a high character, for sure.
So I think he's a late day 2, early day 3 guy, but I would value him further down the line as a higher value safety, right? I'd like to think that I have pretty good track record with projecting safeties, especially guys who are, Katana Oladapo played free safety in that Oregon system, but they were kind of interchangeable safeties. I see him as like more of a strong safety type in the next level, just because they play man a little more often than the single high looks, or in cover 6 you got double the quarters look on that side, so it's like okay, it works. And so I think my track record is I would have Reed Blankenship fairly high. He started for the Eagles now. Tanoa Hufanga was one of my favorites in that class from back in the day, and he started for the 49ers now. And so
we like Battle a lot too. I think was our one last year.
You mean Brian Branch? Battle was here. Brian Branch is also one of my favorites. And he started for the Lions this year as well. So
and was like a second round pick, but like one of the best rookies. too.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions kind of did their draft backwards because Brian Branch at 6 is
Right.
pick, in my opinion. Even if,
100%.
All that to be said, all things said, the tight end struggled this week, but Katana Lavapo and Sierra Baki even as well were kind of big reasons why they were struggling.
The linebackers are good too. Like James Williams from Miami, he's a safety linebacker hybrid. He's like 6'4", but like 250 pounds, so like not like a lot of strength there. But he's got a lot of length on his arms.
Yeah.
Like that was like on display. Especially when he was covering running backs, because Ray Davis like 5'8". Like his dude's arms were just.
Well, that's one of
Reese
the
over
weird
him.
takeaways from this running back group this week. They're all very small.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
we're looking at a
most
lot
of
of
them
like
are
5'7", 5'8", 5'9" guys. So
Barnabas.
they're Barnabas.
They're
And
nice.
Barnabas and
Yeah.
Nate size.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, no, so all right. So normally we would like transition over to the quarterbacks and like you already start talking about Bo Nix and everything like blah blah blah. All right, but here's the thing. I'm just gonna put it out there because I want to get over the running backs. The quarterbacks did not do very well this week.
No, it was
No
terrible.
one stood out.
But that someone stood out. I'll tell you what.
No, he did not
Michael
stand out.
Pratt.
No
He
quarterback
stood out.
stand out.
No,
Okay,
but
okay. What didn't you like about Michael Pratt's performance? Let's go there then.
I didn't see anything spectacular. Like every single quarterback was throwing it 6 yards. I didn't see anything
So you have a bigger
accurate.
problem with how the coaches were running the practice. You didn't have
That's fair.
That's
and that's
probably
very
more
fair.
along
But
the
I
lines
also,
of what his issue
but I
is.
also have Michael Pratt's entire college production to fall back on. So like
college production or college performance.
yes. So all right, but I don't want to talk about the. We talked about the quarterbacks on the last pod. I want to talk about the running backs. Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's not.
All right.
We're not here to talk about Michael Pratt. We're here to talk about our boy Dylan Lobby. We're here to talk about Michael Wiley. We're here to talk about whatever.
Yes.
All right. Who stood out? I'm asking you. Who stood out to you? Obviously, you're a big fan with Dylan Lobby. But who
Dylan
else?
Lowry stood out to me because he did everything I expected.
Sure.
FCS
FCS player. Like he has a big
he's a
step
small
forward.
school guy.
He
He's
has
from
to take a
Hampshire.
step forward to be that.
So
good.
there were a couple things for me. So one, watching him run routes, he is as good as I thought he was going to be.
Sure.
But watching his film and what he did, and against better competition, and he's been doing it
Of course,
in
yeah.
New Hampshire. But number two was his media day yesterday, and listening to him talk, and his attitude and the way that he's looking at this opportunity to get into the NFL. He's a kid who's going to grind. Now, to be fair, that said, while I love his talent, this is an RB3 or a flex guy.
Sure.
That's pretty much his ceiling. Is a small school guy and what he brings to the table. However, what you're going to get him for in rookie drafts and dynasty, you're not going to have to draft him. He's a free agent. And he's a guy that I think in the right situation you can plug in a flex for the next 2 to 3 years and he'll get you points.
He's somebody you grab in the fifth and just say, hey, look, if it works out, that's
Or he's somebody you
fantastic.
pick up
If
as a
not,
free agent, you taxi squad.
oh yeah,
See what
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah, of course.
And when we come to these events, and when I look at these kinds of when we're studying these rookies and we're going with these deeper cut guys, because really the Senior Bowl on the offensive side at the very least, like we're talking about, these are day 2 and day 3 guys. They're not guys who are going to light the world on fire. They're not going to change teams' futures, but they're guys who there's some value there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Dylan Labby's one of those guys who he's not going to light the world on fire. But he's going to be a valuable back end or taxi squad guy that you could plug in a year or two who finds a niche role with the team and he has 1 or 2 seasons worth of value. Just because he's a grinder.
I like it.
And if he's not that grinder, his skill set doesn't get him there. But he's got that grinder mentality. And this could be a good comparison, I think, is Philip Lindsay. Where he's a dude who's kind of undersized. He doesn't necessarily have the skill level that a lot of these dudes do.
Mm-hmm.
He might go undrafted, but he's going to put up a couple 1,000-yard seasons where he scores 3 or 4 touchdowns. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is a nice guy I can plug into my flex.
It's a fair call. And he's actually stood out in these drafts. Like people have said, hey, look, he's there. Like, it's not just oh my God, this FCS player is hitting the hole. No, he's actually scoring points not scoring for, but he's actually getting
Well,
yardage and
And to be fair, there
showing
are a lot
out.
of much better running backs here.
But he's actually
We're
looked
talking
pretty
about
good, though.
Marshawn Lloyd,
Of course.
like a ton of guys who their ceilings are much higher than Loudy's.
But we
he's
want to
just
actually
like-
hear about Loving because no
Well,
one's
I'm
going
a
to talk
nerd who
about
likes
it.
sleepers. Like I like
Of course,
those center
yeah.
class guys. And I think Loudy has some fantasy value as a guy who you're not going to have to draft.
That's awesome.
And
Barnes.
as Dynasty Diehards, we go deep.
I just have a problem with expecting.
I know you've been looking at me this whole
to
time
have
like
a
you want to
1,000
punch
yard
me.
season seems ludicrous to me, but
I don't think. Oh, Buddha. So
Luda.
1,000-yard rushing season.
Oh, don't
no.
say it again. Don't show.
But he can have a 1,500 total yard season as a receiver. He's good enough out of the backfield.
100.
This is so dumb.
Yeah,
Like,
you
he
know,
runs
totally.
go routes really well out of the backfield. And for
I
some
believe those are
reason,
called wheel routes.
wheel routes. No, but he
Yeah.
runs. Yes, whatever. Okay, what do you want to call it?
All right, let's move on
He gets-
from Love.
yes, he gets
Let's
him
move
to-
on
yes,
from Love.
move on.
Okay,
So
Sorry,
we're
all
gonna
right.
talk about Love.
No, do not talk about Love, please. All right, so Barnabas, who stood out as a running back in this one? Obviously, we know Marshawn Lloyd really,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned, he looked great. But, I mean, I think that we can all agree at this point that Kamani Vidal is like D1 right now. I'm just kidding. I interviewed the crap out of Vidal, and I love the hell out of him. But how are you feeling about these running backs?
I know Mike disagrees with me, but I like the other FCS running back. I think he does have the potential to
Okay,
possibly
fair
have
enough.
a 1,000-yard season at some point in his career, and it doesn't require adding up all his return yardage plus his
Sure,
rushing plus
okay,
his receiving
fair
yards.
point. Fair point.
And that's Isaiah Davis, right?
Right.
His dimensions you build in a lab, right? 6 foot 220 is what you want in a running back in
Yep.
today's day and age. We all talk about, Braylon Allen is many people's RB1 in this class, and that guy's huge, right? And arguably, Isaiah Davis is just a smaller version of that, which means he moves a little bit better, right?
Right.
A lot of people have a problem with Braylon Allen's movement.
And everyone wants that
Yeah.
smaller, worse version of everyone.
Sure.
I mean, I think there's value in I think he's faster. Let's just put it there. I think Isaiah Davis is
Faster is very fair.
Yeah. And so here's my thing, right? I came into this process, came into the Senior Bowl week thinking, okay, he's a high variance guy. On our previous
Sure.
show, I said he could go anywhere between rounds 4 and 7. Like I don't know yet.
Yeah.
From what I've seen of him, and so I think he did a couple things. He confirmed he had fairly natural hands this week. That's something that we weren't really sure because he was just catching these dinky screens and then just taking them to the house because he's
Sure.
just a better athlete than everyone else on the field except for the Jenke brothers who are down in Frisco right now, right? Yeah, South Dakota State is just they won the national
Yeah.
championship. He had almost 3,200 yards combined over the past 2 seasons. Like he's a productive guy who showed this week that he has decent enough hands. And I like the way he was moving and such, and he doesn't have a torn ACL in his history. So
Sure.
all good things,
Mike, do you have any insight onto, like, you focused a lot on the Senior Bowl. Do you have any insight onto FCS players that have done the Senior Bowl?
The Senior Bowl in general, those guys are always all day 3 guys. So again, it's not like the little bump. It's just like they're never the top tier guys. These are the guys like the depth pieces, and you're like looking at like the RB2s on teams.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, and RBs never stay healthy. And I need to have a fresher study. I felt like 2 years ago, like I looked through it, and only 2 RBs in the top 24 were like played their full season. Which means that the number 2 guys got their full shot at some point in time. So these guys are all depth pieces, but they're young, and so there's no point in dropping them off. Like Kyron Williams turned out to be phenomenal this year, and
Right.
like Jerome Ford, like no one knew Nick Chubb was his knee was gonna blow up like that. It's just terrible for Nick Chubb. But like again, like this is why you hold on to your guys like that. So like that's my insight as far as like the Senior Bowl with running backs goes.
Is there a running back that stands out to you?
Ray Davis did.
Yeah.
I think this whole class had a lot of, or this Senior Bowl class had a lot of change of pace of running backs. There wasn't really a lot of power backs. There's still out for me on Isaiah Davis. I think he can do it all, but I'm not, I'm just kind of supporting my boy here, but I'm not confident. But like Ray Davis certainly doesn't have like the long speed, and like, he can be a short yard guy for like 4 yards.
Yeah.
Like, that's it, But like he also is a plus in the pass catching game. So and Marshawn Lloyd too. I'm gonna just poo-poo Marshawn Lloyd a little bit here, dude. They forced fumbled him on the sideline, which was Max Mellon did that. We talked about the
Yeah.
There was a run today where he did identify a good cutback lane, but just didn't have the juice to capitalize on it. And I think it was the safety, but there was a corner that was like right there to scoop it up and like tag him. You know,
He also had a run where he made like at least 3 cuts and then scored a touchdown on it, and it looked amazing. So I don't want to discount him too much.
All right.
Yeah, he made some cuts.
But I also don't want running backs just always looking to cut to the outside. Like, I'm getting where my pure athleticism. Like it's like edges are usually still at the NFL level. Like it's the NFL. It's not college anymore. So, anyway,
And Lloyd has a torn ACL in his history.
teams are not gonna like that.
I mean, every running back has a torn ACL at this point. But all right, so that's enough about the running backs. We talked about all this kind of stuff. If you didn't hear a player that you wanted to hear about, we probably talked about him on the last pod on the Razzballs.
We definitely did.
We talked for a good hour and a half or
Good
something like that. So, but this time we went a little more.
We've been live a lot, and we have appreciated it. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're watching live, you're watching later, we appreciate it so much. And I want to thank everybody who's hopped on with us this week.
Of course.
My housemates here in Mobile, Alabama. We've got John, DYnasty Diehards. We've got Mike.
Dirty Mike.
Larry.
Mike, FF_Dirty Mike, Valerie.
Valerie.
That's right.
God damn it, I'm going to say it right. We've got Barnabas here.
Barnabas Lee.
He's been fucking amazing. At PKJB Lee.
Correct.
At PKJB Lee.
There you
Guys,
go.
make sure you are following these guys. They are fantastic, and they're going to help you win your leagues. And that's why we have them on here. Guys, thank you so much for coming on with us. Make sure you are following us at Diehards on Twitter, at Razzball, and make sure you are subscribed to this channel and like our videos because that helps us keep bringing you this content. Have a good night. As Herb